people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
To the mother relay, we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from International Boxing News. Ms. Great Britain to return March 25th. Unified Super Welterweight Champion Natasha Jonas is set to return on March 25th at the M&S Bank Arena in Liverpool. Who would you like to see Miss GB fight next?
Terry Harper.
At the risk of sounding like a broken record and beating a dead horse, a proverbial dead horse, if the question is, who would I like to see Natasha Jonas fight next? That's who I'd like to see her fight in what would be the undisputed junior middleweight championship of the world. Unfortunately, we're not having much luck in that department. Natasha Jonas is smoking Joe Gallagher. The dynamic duo, they're more receptive to a Clarissa Shields fight. That's the name they've been bouncing around the last couple of weeks. Clarissa Shields herself stated she's open to it too. She'd like to fight Natasha Jonas. Clarissa's promoter, Dimitri Salita, said, we want to do the fight with Natasha Jonas. The best and biggest fight for women's boxing. Joe Gallagher is an excellent trainer, one of the best in the world. Even though Clarissa would be the favorite, Jonas is capable, skilled, and slick. Yeah, she's also naturally smaller, several years older, and she has been knocked out before by a naturally smaller woman than Clarissa Shields. I understand that Clarissa Shields over time has not proven to be the most heavy-handed fighter, a knockout merchant. She isn't, but opposite the ring, Natasha Jonas,
I think she might knock Natasha out.
I don't want to see that, but that could be the end result if they make the fight.
It's an easy payday for Clarissa Shields in a fight that she would be widely favored to win. If she could weather the storm opposite the ring, the very statuesque and physically imposing Savannah Marshall, the odds makers would give her considerable odds to beat a smaller fighter in Natasha Jonas.
Opposite the ring, most other junior middleweights, Natasha Jonas has a speed advantage.
She's faster than most other junior middleweights in the division. She's also a better boxer than most other junior middleweights, and that's enough to get her by against them.
It's a unique combination of ingredients that allows Natasha Jonas to campaign as a junior middleweight champion quite successfully. That even though she doesn't have the same size, the natural build that these other junior middleweights have, she can compensate for it with her athleticism and her speed.
Tack on that she's a better boxer than many of them, her accuracy, and she can deal, she can hang.
She can hang with them, but she can't hang with Clarissa. Opposite the ring, Clarissa Shields, she would be outmatched, outgunned in most every area you can think of. Clarissa's bigger, Clarissa's faster, Clarissa's stronger, and Clarissa's more durable than Natasha Jonas.
She took Savannah Marshall's best punches. I'd wager she can take Natasha Jonas's best just fine.
It's a suicide mission if it's anything, and I think the only thing that really makes that fight intriguing and enticing for Natasha is that it's likely a bigger payday than most any other fight that she can have at this point in her career. Sad to say, I don't think Natasha Jonas is going to be in the sport much longer. She's made her money, and she
had a decorated amateur career. She's got a decorated pro career. She's a unified junior middleweight champion, and at this point, she may be courting retirement.
She decides to fight Clarissa Shields. The only way I can interpret that is she's cashing out. She loses those belts. I hardly think she's going to go on another world title run at 38 years old.
Well, I know that there's some other seasoned veterans and former champions that are in their 40s, still vying for alphabet titles, fighters like Marcela Acuña of Argentina, Barbie Juarez of Mexico.
Same age bracket as Natasha, with the difference being that Natasha has a safety net. She does commentator work for Sky Sports.
She's already made very good money, and she doesn't actually have to keep fighting. She has that to fall back on.
So one last go-round, one last hoorah with one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. Even if you lose, there's no shame in it, and you make a lot more money than you would make boxing somebody else.
I think that's the school of thought. I think that's what Team Jonas is thinking.
It's what I think. I still don't like the idea of this fight. I don't want Natasha Jonas' swan song to be getting knocked out by Clarissa Shields in a fight she didn't stand much chance of winning.
There's a distinct distinct possibility this fight might happen. There's also a distinct possibility that Natasha might share the ring with former undisputed welterweight champion Cecilia Brækhus. She's hanging around. She ain't got a lot going on.
Maybe she fights her in late March.
Maybe.
It's a more winnable fight than this one. A much more winnable fight than a fight with Clarissa Shields.
I don't know. We'll see who she ends up fighting.
Men's heavyweight news per tweet from Michael Benson. Eddie Hearn on if Anthony Joshua versus Jermaine Franklin will be on DAZN pay-per-view. It might be pay-per-view. It might not be. Watch this space. Strategically, the people at DAZN, their logistics team, Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, all those good people, they might elect to not bill this as a pay-per-view on the premise that if they don't, they might still get a return in subscribers.
Remember that this is a subscription-based platform, and anybody not already subscribed to DAZN might decide to subscribe that month for that one fight.
Just that one fight. It may not be necessary to bill Joshua versus Franklin as a pay-per-view on that premise.
Cost of a subscription and the added cost of it being a pay-per-view might deter more customers than it attracts. And let's be honest, Joshua versus Franklin ain't the hottest ticket. That wasn't the best choice that Anthony Joshua could have made for a rebound fight. It's a solid choice. It's not the worst, but it's far from the best.
I'm not protesting Jermaine Franklin as an opponent option for Anthony Joshua because it's an even fight. They are in a similar place. They're both rebounding off decision losses, so I'm okay with the fight.
Wasn't my first choice. My first choice was actually Otto Wallin.
Would have serviced as a common opponent between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. If Anthony were to, hypothetically, knock Otto Wallin out, that's more of a statement than potentially knocking out Jermaine Franklin, though all the same. I'm not against the Franklin fight. Being honest, I don't think that's going to be a pay-per-view in America anyway, though in the UK.
This is what we're talking about.
Strategically, the logistics people at DAZN may elect to not bill this as a pay-per-view on the premise that even if they don't, they'll see an uptick in subscribers.
They'll make money that way.
A breath of fresh air from having to pay box office prices for glorified tune-up fights like Fury versus Chisoria. That was billed as a box office fight over there. That was a pay-per-view in the United Kingdom.
Glorified sparring session between two old buddies.
The only reason they billed it as a pay-per-view was to satisfy Tyson Fury's financial demands. But you tell me if his financial demands actually made that a box office fight. Did that make that fight pay-per-view worthy?
The show, the overall card, the undercard, and the main event.
I have no doubts that Anthony Joshua's detractors and Eddie Hearn's are going to have a lot to say. They have a lot to say about Anthony Joshua taking on Jermaine Franklin instead of someone else. But I've also got no doubts that they'll subscribe to DAZN if they haven't subscribed already for that one fight.
They'll jump on their social media and pretend that they're not watching, but they are.
They'll jump on their social media and pretend that they're not subscribed, but they will be for at least that 1 month so they can watch that one fight.
They're telling themselves that Frank has reclaimed the throne as the best promoter in British boxing at this time on the back of what, 1 or 2 shows he did with Tyson Fury.
The Dillian White fight and the Derek Chisora sparring session.
Never mind that after all these years in the sport, Frank has failed to turn his promotional outfit into a worldwide enterprise like Eddie has with Matchroom. Frank is still local.
Not global like Matchroom. How many other guys like Tyson Fury has he got?
You know, guys who can actually draw.
Because Matchroom's got a couple of guys like that, not exclusive to the British boxing scene. Eddie Hearn also revealed that he has since spoken to former UFC champion Francis Ngannou as he talks about a fight with Anthony Joshua.
Do you have any idea how big that fight would be? That crossover fight?
Before you begrudge Anthony Joshua or Eddie Hearn for entertaining the idea of a crossover fight with a former UFC champion, need I remind you that Tyson Fury, he did it first. He was trying to do a crossover fight with Francis Ngannou.
Didn't he ask him how big his Corey is?
Whatever that means. Now myself, I'm no fan of these novelty acts, these circus fights that pit fighters of different disciplines against each other. Overall, one guy is always going to have an unfair advantage. One guy is always going to be out of his element.
Francis Ngannou is not a boxer.
He's not going to all of a sudden start understanding the sweet science in a matter of weeks, in a matter of months, after a camp or 2 camps. He's not going to have the same
level of expertise as somebody who's been at this for years.
You can hardly begrudge Anthony Joshua or Eddie Hearn for entertaining a circus fight like this because, I reiterate, that's exactly what Tyson Fury was doing just a few months ago. I wrote out Deontay Wilder. He'd be open to the idea of boxing an MMA fighter on the premise of the amount of money that he'd make for doing so.
On the premise that he might get more money for boxing a Francis Ngannou than boxing Boxing and Andy Ruiz.
Francis Ngannou didn't get cut from the UFC because he started losing fights, started getting his ass kicked. He left on a high. He left on his own terms.
His fan base is very much still intact.
You do a crossover fight between a Francis Ngannou and a Tyson Fury, or a Deontay Wilder, or in this instance, an Anthony Joshua, and you're going to bring in massive, mammoth pay-per-view buys from boxing fans and MMA fans alike.
Think Maymac.
But tack on that these are heavyweights and the overall mystique of the heavyweight division. There really is nothing like a big heavyweight fight.
You could do monster numbers with this thing if you got it over the line. You really could. The only real implication is Anthony Joshua's coming off of 2 consecutive losses, and he's on the bounce. He's on the rebound. He's rumored to have listed the aid of Derek James.
Did you enlist the aid of star trainer Derek James, who trains Errol Spence Jr. and Jermel Charlo, unbeaten up-and-comer Frank Martin, so you could share the ring with MMA fighters? Did you enlist the aid of this trainer so you could fight in circus fights?
Because you're on the rebound. You're on the bounce. Is this the kind of thing you need to be thinking about right now?
It's a little different when a Tyson Fury or a Deontay Wilder entertains the idea of a crossover fight with someone like Francis Ngannou, because they're older fighters than Anthony Joshua is. They're actually closer to the end of their careers.
Yeah, Tyson Fury's courting retirement every other week.
Every other week he tells you he can't retire because boxing is the only thing that keeps him sane. That guy's brain is a bag of cats. In any event, they entertain that kind of fight because they're courting retirement. So if Anthony Joshua does it, is he courting retirement? Is that the kind of headspace that he's in?
That's the implication. Don't get me wrong, you could make a fuck ton of money with this thing.
You could hardly begrudge Anthony Joshua for potentially doing something that his own contemporaries would do. They'd fight Francis Ngannou just as easily as he would.
Is that really what he needs to be thinking about right now?
And finally, in men's lightweight news, Oscar De La Hoya said he's 100% certain on delivering Davis versus Garcia, a fight that has been met with some skepticism.
Yeah, people are still wondering whether or not it's going to actually happen.
Oscar putting his prize stallion, his unbeaten up-and-comer, in there with Javonte Davis?
It's not like Ryan Garcia's interested in belts. He doesn't want to become a champion, so what the hell else are you supposed to do?
The Hall of Fame, former 6th Division champion and head of Golden Boy Promotions, provided a status update on the planned Javonte Davis versus Ryan Garcia blockbuster event, optimistically eyed for mid-April. De La Hoya saw his demands met when Premier Boxing Champion staff provided Golden Boy and Garcia with a contract offer containing details surrounding what has become the most anticipated fight of 2023. April 15th, Ryan Garcia versus Tank Davis. It's going down, De La Hoya revealed in an on-air DAZN interview during Golden Boy's first show of 2023 this past Saturday in Inglewood, California.
Listen, I don't know that this is the most highly anticipated fight of this year, but it is one of the bigger ones.
That much we can say. I'm going to say 100% De La Hoya stated of his belief that Davis versus Garcia makes its way to the boxing calendar sooner rather than later. Baltimore's Davis currently holds the WBA regular title at lightweight, where Garcia still technically campaigns, though the bout, once finalized, will come with a 136-pound contracted weight limit. Garcia fought one division north in each of his last 2 starts. The unbeaten rising star from Victorville, California, officially weighed in at 138 pounds in his 12-round win over Emmanuel Tago last April 9th in San Antonio, Texas, and was at 140 pounds for his 6th-round knockout of Javier Fortuna.
Ryan Garcia was always a big boy for 135 pounds. No surprise he outgrew the weight. It's no surprise that Javonte Davis wants to bring him down.
Didn't have a problem fighting Mario Barrios at 140 pounds, but when it comes to Ryan, who is perceived as having a higher ceiling than a Mario Barrios, he wants to weaken him a bit, soften him up.
Bring him down to 136.
We sent the contract back. We made the changes, noted De La Hoya. We're just waiting back for an answer, but I feel very optimistic that it's going to happen.
There's been a lot of widespread rumors about Showtime's future in the sport of boxing. PBC's relationship with them, and where do they go if Showtime is dissolved? If Paramount, Showtime's parent company, decides to trim the fat and decides they don't really need boxing as a part of their catalog.
They don't need boxing content.
Could this fight be big enough to turn the tide for Showtime's future in the sport?
It's a very good question, as possible locations for the match are being eyed. The Raiders' Allegiant Stadium is the possible site for the fight, April 15th.
This is a big fight. It's a very big fight in the sport.
Though big, Big is a relative term. Big when it comes to boxing. Boxing is not at the forefront of the sporting world.
Not in America.
How many buys does this do with the American audience dwindling in the sport of boxing and rampant piracy that affects the buy rate of most any and every pay-per-view you attempt to stage? How many buys does Ryan Garcia versus Javonte Davis bring in?
We'll find out shortly.
According to Oscar, we will. The biggest Las Vegas venue is at least a possible site for a huge boxing event headed to the fight capital of the world. BoxingScene.com has learned that Al Heyman's Premier Boxing Champions and his company's promotional partners will explore the viability of bringing the Javonte Davis versus Ryan Garcia fight to Allegiant Stadium once their contracts are finalized. The home of the NFL's Las Vegas Raiders hasn't hosted a boxing show since it opened in 2020, but it could accommodate more than 70,000 fans for fights. The other two venues that could host the Davis versus Garcia card, which is targeted to take place April 15th, are the T-Mobile Arena and the MGM Grand Garden Arena.
How does one reconcile Showtime's potential future, potentially leaving the sport of boxing at the same time that a fight like this is being negotiated?
Survival almost immediately comes to mind. Perhaps the people at Showtime Sports, Stefan Espinoza, and that wing of the Showtime platform want to justify their continued employment at Showtime by delivering a big fight, a very big fight, one of the bigger fights they can hope to deliver.
Maybe they're trying their best to deliver their higher-ups a message. You know, the people that are above Stefan Espinoza's pay grade, Chris McCarthy and Bob Backish.
Major changes are coming to the Showtime platform. It's not a secret that the people above Stefan Espinoza's pay grade, his bosses, what they're talking about are budget cuts. What they're talking about is reallocating resources.
Anything that accounts for less than 10% of Showtime's overall viewership will not be a priority. And yes, that means boxing.
The majority of Showtime's subscribers are not subscribed to Showtime because they're into boxing. That's the story that the numbers tell, whether you're talking about fights that happen on the regular Showtime platform or their box office fights. They're pay-per-views. They don't move the needle.
But this fight might. This is one of the bigger fights Showtime can hope to deliver to the platform, and maybe it is an effort to send their higher-ups a message.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. It seems to me that Stefan Espinoza and the PBC jointly, they need this fight to happen a little more than Oscar and Ryan do. A little more than the people over there at DAZN.
This is one of the few pay-per-views you could put on that might actually sell 1 million pay-per-views. It might. And just imagine if it actually lands at Allegiant Stadium, 70,000 fight fans. What a scene.
I think the real problem is, even if that best case scenario comes into fruition, every fight moving forward won't get that same reaction, may not deliver those same metrics.
Not all fights are created equal. Their overall value.
And just imagine if the fight delivers in terms of metrics, but Ryan Garcia's the guy that wins.
Well, that wouldn't be good for the PBC, and that wouldn't be good for Showtime Sports, because he ain't a Showtime fighter.
So we'll see what happens.